Welcome to the Selling in the Motor Trade podcast, in association with Simco Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett. Now, some of you probably already know me as Skippy. I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. Now, this is a bit of a Christmas special, and it's probably going to be the start of a new series of Selling in the Motor Trade. Today, I'm joined with Jason Cranswick from Marubeni. He looks after Norton Way Group. He looks after RRG and HPL. And the listeners to this will know that we've interviewed Jason probably about, 6 months ago. And part of the interview, you've got to go back and listen to it. It's a great interview. But we're talking about different books that Jason's read. And in the studio here, I had a lot of the same books there. So I read that book to start with. It was The 1 Minute Manager, and that was a good book. And then he said, you got to listen to this one or read this one. It's Drive to Survive. This is a brilliant book. And there were so many books that we both read. And I know for myself, Jason, that definitely changed my life. And after it, Jason said, you know what, Skip? We need to do some sort of a book club. I said, what a great idea. So this is the start of the Selling the Motor Trade Book Club. So Jason, welcome aboard again.
Skippy, thank you very much. We sound like a couple of old farts, really, don't we? Talk about book club.
Well, it's just one of those things that I started the motor trade when I was 17 years old. And I don't know about you, Jason, but I started washing cars for a living. Okay, school was not the strongest bit for me. Okay, I went in, started washing cars for a living, then started going into the service department, parts department, all that sort of stuff. So when people tell me to read, I went, I got out of school because I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
But there was a manager gave me a book. He said, you really need this. And it really just turned me on. Now, I know you had a similar experience, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And again, like you, I wasn't an avid reader, and, I joined the industry in 89. So, I was kind of 18, 19 years old. So, reading wasn't top of the hit list then. And I must admit, I got in like you, and we were talking about this before, the 1 Minute Manager series is what I started reading. And I guess I wanted to be, a good salesperson and a good manager. So, those were books that I enjoyed, and I guess over the years have tried to pass those on to other people in a similar situation. But it's something I must admit I've got more into over the years, and I'm quite an avid reader now. But it's good to spend time talking about it. And I think you and I both agreed we'd love to share some of the things that we've read and some of the stuff we've taken from it. And hey, it won't be for everybody, but for some people this might be a bit of a bit of a thing to get into.
Yeah, you know what? There's a phrase I've written down here. Leaders are readers, and they do. Do you remember? I forgot about this. We should have talked about this before we hit record. But Paul Cummings is a great American sales trainer. 9 Square Grid and all of that.
That's right. Yeah.
So
if I could, would you?
Yeah. We were doing some work with Honda. This was Honda UK, and it was over here doing some stuff. And there's one thing they said in his presentation, and I spoke with him at the Australian Automotive Dealers Association. Fascinating guy. But he talked about all the big mansions in the state he was in, or California or something like that. He was just reading this article, okay? And he said all these big mansions, everyone had a library.
Yeah.
He thought, wow, someday I want a house that's got a library in it. But then it said in the article, the books were bought before the house was built.
Okay.
And that's when he went, the books helped get the house book built. And I don't know if it did or didn't, but I kind of believe it. I really do. So listen, I'm going to talk
to... The books made a big house for Jeff Bezos, didn't they? Because he made Amazon.
Yes. Yeah, Jeff's done very well out of his books there. I love that one. So listen, we're going to be speaking to a couple of different audiences there. Okay. For me, I'm going to be speaking to, if you're that business manager, that sales manager, and you want to get your team into some books, you want some ideas for your sales meetings, that's who I'm going to talk at. And I know, Jason, you're going to be talking about industry leaders. You're going to be talking to people who do what you do, and maybe direct it that way.
Okay, all right. Well, look, should we talk about the one that we've got in mind?
Right. So what do we got to start with? We had to start, and there was so many we had to start on. What are we going for?
We've gone for Who Moved My Cheese, which is a personal favourite of mine.
Yeah, great book. Absolutely great book. Who Moved My Cheese? Dr. Spencer Johnson, written in 1998. And I'm going to say first, I like this book because I'm going to say it now. I call it a toilet book. Now, you've got some images in your mind there. I'm really sorry for people listening to this if you're eating breakfast, but it's something that it's quick, it's easy, you can flick through when you've got nothing else to do, and it's short. And I suppose that's why I like it, because it was short to start with. Can you give us a bit of an overview of the book?
Yeah, I mean, I love the book. As you say, it's a really quick read. If you don't even want to read it, you can watch it on YouTube in about 10, 15 minutes. But it's about two little mice and two little men that live in a maze, and someone nicks the cheese. And effectively, it kind of follows the story of who goes out to find new cheese and who just wants to moan about the fact that cheese has been moved. And I think there's some really interesting metaphors in there that we can really relate to. But it's one that I first discovered probably about 2005. I was doing a role coaching heads of businesses, and the role was all about taking people through a change process and getting people to face up to the fact that things were going to be different. And that's where I first discovered it. And I think this story is a really strong one, and it really forces you to sit and think about whether you see yourself in there. Whether you're one of the little mice or one of the little men, whether you're someone that can go off and find new cheese, or whether you're going to just sit in the cheese station C, as they call it, and moan about the fact the cheese is gone.
I just think the motor trade at the moment, goodness me, don't we need this? It's all about change. Yeah. I mean, we've both been in the motor trade for a long time. And have you ever seen the change that we've gone through over the last 4 years in the motor trade?
It's incredible. And it's funny, isn't it? Because, there is a huge amount of change, and, change brings with it, uncertainty and, anxiety for some areas. And I think we all suffer, those at times, but also it brings, excitement, and, it becomes quite exhilarating. And even when change is forced upon us, our attitude to how we embrace it is what's important. And, that's why, I was keen to talk about this one, because that's what this story tells. And we were talking before, Skip, about who we were, and there's these two little mice and two little men. And I think, funny enough, we came up with two different answers. Who did you think you were?
Well, let's people haven't read the book yet. We want you to go and read this book. That's the goal of this. Go and listen to it on the way home in your car, Audible, something like that. But there's here's the 4 different people, and we'll actually, some of the listeners to this will probably know who I am, okay? But first you have the 2 mice. There's Sniff and this guy. So what happens is they go into this maze and they try and find some cheese. So what the 2 mice do is they just run into all these little dead ends and up these blind alleys, and they keep on running around until they find the cheese. But Sniff, he's a bit smarter because he sniffs around to find the cheese. Scurry, he just runs around and bounces around everywhere until he falls over it almost. Then you've got these 2 little people. Now, if you've not read the book yet, this might not make too much sense, okay? But read the book. And these 2 guys are people. They're very intelligent, maybe too intelligent for their own good, but they're mouse sized. And you've got a guy called Paw first, okay? So, and then there's Hem. Now, these guys, they go into the maze and they find this cheese to start with. Cheese, though, I suppose, Jason, we need to say that's a bit of metaphor for life, isn't it? Okay, cheese is what? How do you describe what is cheese to you?
Well, I suppose cheese is, the thing, isn't it? It's either the money, or it's the recognition, or it's the the feel good. It could be, it could be the big house, or it could be the fast car. But effectively, it's the thing that they cherished, but also probably felt they deserved. And actually, ironically, it was the thing they took for granted.
But also, it's not just that. I think it's also someone in your organization. It might be a line manager saying, hey, the cheese is, I want that next position. Where is that position? I want that position. And some of them think that position is just given and granted. I'm not talking about your people specifically now, but it happens, doesn't it? So you got Hem and Haw. How would you describe Hem and Haw? So Hem.
Okay. Well, they look very similar. They look like a couple of buddies, dressed quite similar, but they certainly were different thinkers. So you had Hem, who was probably the stick in the mud. He was the guy that really didn't like the fact. He really took objection to the fact that cheese had gone. And then you had Haw, who kind of looked the same, but actually started to break out and start to think differently. Yeah. And he was a bit more of a risk taker. And actually, as the story goes on, Haw was the one who fronted up to the situation, whereas, quite frankly, Hem just, he just moaned about it. He was just bitter that the cheese had gone, and quite frankly, was going to wait for that cheese to be brought back to him.
I love the bit, because I've almost heard this word for word in car dealerships around the world. Once the cheese ran out, they had to go and find new cheese. That's the moral of this whole story, okay? However, when the cheese ran out, it was actually Hem who turned around and said, "Where's my cheese? Where's my cheese?" He starts yelling, "Where's my cheese? This is not fair. This is not fair." And it was everyone else's fault, not his. Don't you hear that all the time?
Yeah, you do. And you can understand it. I think people work super hard for things, and when it changes and when something happens that they feel is outside of their control, then they don't like it. And I think that's the big difference though between the two little guys. Haw, he kind of fronted up and he went off and started putting in countermeasures and controls to make sure that he could not only find new cheese, but when he found it, make sure that it didn't go missing again. And it's quite funny, how when you read through the story and they say, the whole point of this is to get people interested in going picking up the book and maybe reading it. But certainly, if we could be a bit more Haw-like, if I can use that term, then
yes. He's the hero. He's the hero in this.
Yeah. It does seem to be.
Jason, I fear I am scurry, and it's when I read it, I'd like to say no, I'm not, but really I am, and what I mean by that is, I feel myself as, even in Simcoe training, we've been going for 23 years. There's been so much change there. I found I scurry around. I mean, when COVID happened, okay, we couldn't go into businesses. Our business stopped overnight. We still had mouths to feed, okay? And I know we had competitors went into the sulking. This is not fair. Why did the government do this to us? Yeah. And I just went scurried. What do I do? Podcast. Let's do that. Bang. But I should have been more sneaky, I fear. I should have put a bit more planning into it. I should have. I see my limitations there. I just run around into things. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try this. Yeah. And I don't slow down enough. I think that's who I am in the story. What about yourself?
Well, I definitely don't want to be Hem.
No,
because he was the guy that just sat and evaporated in the end. I'd like to think I'm Haw. I'd like to think that I'm prepared to go and deal with change and try new things and take a bit of risk and get out there in the maze and go and find new cheese. And that's the one that I guess I related to. I remember when I first read the book, like you say, I saw the sniff and scurries being the ones that were going off and sort of breaking out from the establishment. And it's interesting. You do see yourself in it, and I must admit, whereas maybe 15 years ago, maybe I'd have seen myself as a sniff or a scurry. Now I kind of look at it thinking, well, I want to be the little man who went out and found new cheese and made sure cheese didn't move again, and certainly don't want to be typecast into being the guy that wasn't prepared to go and try new things.
Jason, for me, he's definitely the hero because he goes through all of the emotions. Right at the beginning, this is not fair. Why have they moved it? For me, the other thing is Hem tried his hardest to bring his mate down. You don't want to go look for new cheese. Just sit here and wait here. They'll bring it back to it. And it's almost the entitlement. Would that be the right phrase that Hem had?
Yeah, I think so. I think So that's my dog rolling around on the floor. If you can hear something,
No, that's good.
he clearly liked the thought of book club. Yeah. He was quite happy to bring his mate down. He'd have been most comfortable surrounding himself by other people like him that were going to complain about how how everything's not fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one to watch for. Do you know what I thought was also interesting, Skip? When I watched this again, I made some notes about what I was prompted to think about. Hoare, he really challenged the status quo. He was prepared to think differently.
Yeah.
Actually, and I know it sounds a bit guru-ish, but he kind of manifested
Oh no,
what
he definitely
what he was going to get. And I know it's a big topic at the minute, but his positive
he
mental
visualized it. He visualized the cheese.
he
He
did.
visualizes so many different types of cheeses. What new
Yeah.
cheese could be.
Yeah.
Change could be better.
Yes.
I tell you, the other thing I see, I'm going to focus on hem a bit, because if you're listening to this, you're a hem, okay? We see lots of hems, okay? And they're good guys. They're not bad people at all. They just want that security in life. And when it changes, they go through more pain. But it reminds me that there's a phrase, any privilege becomes a right very quickly in the motor trade. And I'm going to tell you a story about the Swansway organization. Peter Smythe, I know he listens to the podcast and the guests on it and listen to it all the time. I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, but in one of his businesses, it was Stafford Audi. There's a guy turned up, 21 years old, and he was a carpenter or electrician, something like that. And they gave him a brand new registered tax Audi A1. Now, of course, Jason, he came out of an old clapped out Fiesta or something like that, and he loved this thing. He tells the story where he washed the car himself. We don't wash cars ourselves in the motor trade. On his first day off, he went and took grandma to the garden centre. On his first weekend, he went back to his mates on the weekend for football training, something like that, and left the keys to the Audi there so they could all see he's in his lovely new Audi. How long did he like that car for? Actually, he liked that car for about a week and a half. Because the other trainee, they put them in an A3. Someone else was driving a Q5. Someone else is in something else. How long do you like that poverty pack piece of shit? Yeah. Okay, Audi A1.
Yeah.
It's a week and a half, because when he first got it, okay, it was great because he compared it to where he's coming from. And it was that privilege he's got it. Okay. And then he was whinging and bitching about everyone else got something else. I tell you what, if you took the A1 off him, then what would happen? And it's kind of like that. Change is good because his first change was great for him. But I tell you what, if they took it off him, it'd go the other way.
You just prompted me to think about something. I remember, it's not relevant to this book, but it's that whole piece around the fear of loss actually is more powerful than the attraction of gain, and that's something that's interested in our industry. That we do live in a world where we're trying to find ways of motivating and so on. Again, this could lead into another area of where we go looking. But the whole behavioral science piece, and as you say, the things that become expected norms and the stuff that doesn't have the desired outcome in terms of motivation that was expected, it's quite surprising. And I think these are things that, if you are a team manager, if you're a new manager or you've got a team that you're trying to find new ways of motivating, then be prepared to try new things and listen to people that have got different ideas. But also, you got to understand the true kind of science behind individuals' behaviors. I think that's something we don't spend enough time on as an industry.
I think fear of loss is a huge motivator for customers. Okay, buying a car for fear someone else buys it, salespeople, but also I think there is part of that in this book. Okay, and I mean the fear. What was holding my hero is Hoare. What held him back to start with is the fear of going out there. And what if he didn't find cheese? And what if he was like, he's went through it once before and he's getting older now. I don't know if I can do it. But what actually got him there was the fear of, well, if he doesn't do it, actually, we're never going to have cheese ever again. So a bit of fear is good. And a great friend of both of ours, Gareth Timmins.
Yes.
Okay. I said to him on the podcast, and a great book. He's got another book coming out. We'll need to, at some point, we need to talk about his book on this. But
yes,
he turned around and he said it was the fear of going back to his old life, the fear of telling everyone that actually I'm no longer going to be a Royal Commando now was probably as big a motivator for him than the pleasure of getting to where he was.
Yeah. Do you know what? One that we should put on the list, Skip, and I know you and I were kind of talking about where we go next with some of these. A definite read is the Chimp Paradox.
Oh,
Chimp Paradox. We've got to look at. That's a fascinating one. If we're gonna try and explore some of these topics of why people do things and imposter syndromes and stuff like that, then Chimp Paradox has got to go onto our got to go onto our reading list.
It's got to go on the list. I want to bring that up sooner rather than later. I think that's absolutely brilliant. So, can I ask you a question? This is a tough one though. You go into a new organization, not your organization. Let's say you acquire a new business or whatever, and if that happens, you're going to have a whole lot of hem's going to be there. Okay, there'll be some sniffs and scurries. Okay, and you've got to guide them in the right way. Okay, you're going to have some hems. How do we make hems haws? What have you done in the past? How do we show them the mirror that change is not always bad?
I think a lot of it comes back to creating a safe environment. The maze can't feel like it's a scary maze. It's got to feel like it's somewhere safe for people to go into. I think there's a bit in here about almost being able to kind of highlight the risk of cheese being moved, and get people sensitive to the fact that we need to, be out there looking for, the signs of cheese, being taken away. I think, there's that whole piece about fail fast and learn. And that sounds a bit of a cliche, but, creating an environment where people are prepared to go and try something without the fear of it being painful or terminal. But as long as we learn from it, I think
that's not cliche. That's so important. Too many organizations, people don't want to try something, but fear the bollocking they're going to get. That's not a cliche at all. That's a big one for me. I know you do that in your organization. Come on, let's try.
Yeah. And it's also being prepared to go off and pivot, to use that word. So okay, we're trying this, not working. Okay, what are we going to try next? Because not trying anything isn't an option. And it's that almost intention to find reason to pivot rather than making change a thing that everybody just wants to avoid and resist. So there is no, there's no set formula, but I think it's ironic that a lot of these messages are in the Who Moved My Cheese story.
Well, I scribbled down this. I don't know if it was directly in there or not. I don't know if because when you read these books, doesn't your mind go off into lots of different areas and you think of your life and people you're working with. So I scribbled down here, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail at it? I don't know if I directly got it from the book, but actually that's what I just scribbled down on one of my notes here.
I think that's isn't that one of the things, or it's certainly the sentiment of one of the things that Hall writes on the wall.
I think it's almost. I don't know if he wrote it on I can't remember exactly, but it's something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think if you knew that you could not fail, then you would probably take what you regard to be even bigger risk, or your attitude towards trying things would be much more open-minded. Because you've got that reality of not being able to fail. Now, in reality, that's not a real situation. There's always going to be risk of downsides. But I actually think, if you could dare to think, well, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Then, you'd probably come up with some new ideas.
Yeah, because I things like I love it, but I'll worry that people go off on a loose cannon sometimes. When I say people, I'm talking about me. I know I've gone off on a loose cannon. Okay, I've got 60 grand worth of development that I did back in 2006 on a digital program which failed because I went off like on a loose cannon. So yeah, I do worry about that sometimes, but I get the sentiment. If I didn't try it though, I already did fail, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you know what this has reminded me of though? And funny enough, I was talking at a franchise dealer conference the other day and just talking about change and, and the plan. And the reality is we sit there as individuals assuming that you look over there at someone else, you think, God, aren't they lucky? They it's just been a straight line for them. They've gone from here to here, and I want some of that. The reality is it never is a straight line. The reality is it's valleys and troughs and peaks and snow-capped mountains and bog-filled water-filled bogs that you have to get through to get to the end. And that's the reality. It's that journey. And I think the thing is, you learn at each of those points, but I think you've got to put yourself out there, and you've got to try things. And do you know what? I think that's the great thing about our industry, though, is all of those opportunities are out there. It is never a straight line. And even if the nearest thing to a straight line probably is when we've come out of things like COVID and suddenly the market takes us, that's a straight line. The reality is that's unusual. And we're now in that peaks and troughs, mountains and valleys situation. And so I come back to the point I said right at the beginning is, as individuals, we've got to have the right skill set, tool set and mindset to see our way through that journey. And be prepared to embrace it. You sound a bit evangelical here, mate.
It is, but you know what? There's so many people in motor trade. We've been saying it all the time since COVID-19. There were lots of people like, look at it, I'm heroes. Look what I've achieved. Look what I've done. And Sean Kelly, a great fan of the podcast, says all the time, listen, when we've done really, really well, we always pat ourselves on the back. When it's shit, it's always the market's fault. It can't be both. Can't be both.
You know what? I saw, there was a great thing on LinkedIn the other day that I saw, and I think I've read this right. It says, when you're winning, you're not as good as you think you are. When you're losing, you're not as bad as you think you are.
I love that.
And I think there's a lot of true sentiment in that one.
So true. So true. This sounds like I'm in therapy now here, but okay, because I know I'm definitely scurry, and I shouldn't be. I should be more. I should be more whore. I should plan more. I should sniff more. I should start sniffing when the cheese is old, and look for new cheese before the cheese runs out, and all that sort of stuff. There. Okay. But here's the other thing. I spoke at the Australian Automotive Dealers Association with Patrick Tessier. I was out there with Paul Cummings was speaking. It was Grant Cardone another year, David Martin, and I love speaking at that conference. Okay, and Patrick really does a great conference out there. And blow my own trumpet, I was voted the best speaker, and I was patting myself on the back. I was loving it. But then I had the reviews, and one guy said, "Okay, it was okay." What did he say? Wasn't average? He said something like that. He said, average, heard it all before, nothing really new. And of course, what did I focus on? I focused on that guy. So much so, Jason, I'm embarrassed to tell you, I had to phone the guy. I phoned the guy and said, what's wrong? That was one of my best things, okay? And he had a great guy. He said, well, it's not what I was looking for. Well, what were you looking for? I'm a business manager. You didn't do anything on finance. Well, it wasn't fucking about finance, okay? But it's just because I was so focused on when you're bad, you're not as bad as you think you are. But why do we as humans focus on the bad? Well, is that just me? I don't know. I'm in therapy now, Jason.
Well, I don't know. I'm no therapist, mate. I can tell you that for sure. But you've teed up nicely there to the whole chimp paradox, and again, I think this is one that people should spend time thinking about, because at the end of the day, there's a little chimp up here in our brain that we can't control. We can't stop it doing the thing that it does, but what we can do is we can kind of read the signs, and maybe that's the thing. Maybe that was your chimp that was reacting then, and maybe if you'd have seen the signs, what you'd have done is put in a bit of a strategy to maybe pause, breathe, Maybe
Okay,
take
well,
some advice before you make that call and front the guy up.
that is it. We were going to ask people what they want next from Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, the 5 a.m. Club, Drive to Survive. But I tell you what, the chimp paradox, I think we need to get into that. Now, Kenneth Blanchard is the man that wrote 1 Minute Manager. He wrote this in conjunction with Dr. Spencer Johnson. So that's where people want to get into reading. Okay, they've got to look at that series, I think. So we're going to definitely talk about the 1 Minute Manager on another time, because there's too many valuable things in that to leave out. But there's something I learned this morning. This book was first published in 1998. Okay,
Yeah.
Since then, it's been rewritten 10 times.
My gosh.
And I just love that. So you think about this, okay? Dr. Spencer Johnson didn't just write it and leave his cheese and let it go off there to get stale and be not right. He's updated. Now, the story's still the same. When I say rewritten, there's been 10 different times he's adjusted things. Little things like hem. So if you go and read this from yours and my old copy, it was an old one there. I did some research on the internet when they said 10 times. So if you listen to the audiobook, apparently that's the latest one. Okay. But you think about that 10 times that's a relatively short period of time, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, that's life, isn't it? Changes.
Yeah. I tell you what, he practices what he preaches. So, Jason, I'm going to say I love this bit of therapy as well. Okay, I'm going to say the chimp paradox. I'm going to keep. You can keep being my therapist. Okay, and see what I do wrong.
Keep sending the checks, then, Skippy.
No problem at all. But listen, what I've got from that is that book is as relevant today as when I first met it.
It is.
I think it's so relevant in the motor trade now. I think I just personally want to urge everyone to listen. Go to Amazon, get a copy of the book. Okay, give it to people in your businesses. Jason, I hope you don't mind me talking about your business, but I understand you're going to give some of your senior managers this book.
Yeah. So I'm a bit like Amazon. I keep sort of dishing out books, and I think that this is one that that we use, and I know Steve is using it now with kind of the managers and sales teams around what's happening in the business. We've used a few recently. A couple of others that we've used is the Good to Great, and I think we'd all like to sort of emulate the story of Good to Great. There's another one in the series that I've issued out as well, which
better you told me this one. And not Good to Great. It's the next
it's
one.
How the Mighty Fall.
Yeah.
How the Mighty Fall. And do you know what though, Skippy? And I've seen this a lot in different businesses. Is look, just and I always caveat it, just because I've given the teams the books, I'm not expecting them to sit there and avidly read them. I'd love to think that it helps them think that they can think differently, and that we're, as a business, we're wanting to encourage a strength of mindset around what we go through as an industry. But like we said right at the beginning, look, even if you're not an avid reader, then a lot of this stuff now, you should say audiobook, we're always in the car.
Yeah.
So you can jump on a podcast like this, or you can get an audio book and you can absorb it that way. A lot of it, and Who Moved My Cheese is available on YouTube. You can sit there and watch it in 10 or 15 minutes in a sales meeting, and that's great. Because you can get other people to look and say who they think they are, if they're sniff, scurry, hem, haw. It's a really good tool like that. But
we'll put a link to that YouTube there. That's it is 10-15 minutes. You can watch it in a sales meeting. It just sums it up quickly, to the point. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. But we spoke about this many months ago, that there's so much that we've enjoyed from taking different references. Then it's great to talk about, and we've waffled on for half an hour or more about a book that you could have finished reading in half the time.
I got to say, whenever I talk about any management, whenever we do any management training, Jason, I'm always training myself more than anyone in the room, because I just see myself making these same mistakes so often there, and thinking, why have I done that? Why did I react this way? Why did I react that way? So it's I hope this doesn't come across like we're the experts here, because I know this person definitely is not. But if you can get something from it, that's what this is all about. And listen, my last takeaway, Jason, I'm going to give you my last takeaway from the book, and I'm going to ask your last takeaway. What I really liked at the end of it, my hero, okay, Hoare, who did change. He sulked a bit to start with. His friend tried to bring him down there. Okay, he went back to try and get his friend. His friend wasn't interested at all. Okay, and sometimes you got to leave people where they are and let them make their own decisions. What I really like, though, is when he found the cheese, the huge pile of cheese, the fresh, new cheese, he still had his shoes hung around his neck because he wasn't going to go into complacency again. That was one of my favorite takeaways at the end.
Well, very much the same. Don't fall asleep at the switch. That's what I wrote down here.
Yeah, so true. So true. Listen, I really love this, okay? And listen, we hope you've loved this as well. This is coming out just before Christmas. So if you listen to this while you're walking off your Christmas dinner, okay, I hope it has made your journey a little bit more enjoyable. Thanks for listening. And Jason, thank you so much for this.
Cheers, mate. Speak again soon, yeah?
That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn. Thank you.